Welcome everybody to Tapestry weaving on this Monday afternoon. Almost going to make Darren teach a whole new technique. Yes, we're going to learn tapestry weaving today. My name's Claire. I'll be hanging out in the chat, answering any questions you may have there or forwarding them on to Darren. I'll also be putting the handouts for both how to make your loom and how to do the weaving in case you didn't get those at all. And with that, I'll let Darren take it away.
All right, welcome to class. Tapestry, not crochet, tapestry weaving for today. We've got a lot to cover in class. If you have the handout, there's a lot of information in the handout, and quite a bit of that information is for like future practice and future learning. We won't be able to cover everything in the handout, but I am going to cover everything you need to get started and a lot of the stitches that are my favorite. So with that being said, I do want to probably keep it on this view for just a little longer than usual. It's a little difficult teaching a weaving class because there's not a lot of room here on my desk, but this is it's a store-bought tapestry loom, and it has an easel. It has set up like this, so that way you can stand it up as you're working on it. So it is very nice to work on. And you can see along the top and along the bottom are these little hooks, and that is what you will use to warp this loom. And quickly, I'm going to demonstrate a little bit on how to warp it, and then we'll switch the view to my hands. But I think it'll be easier for you to see this way. All right, so the first thing, you want to just get a strand of yarn. It's best to use cotton yarn. A cotton yarn is best because it doesn't stretch. You don't want your warp to be stretchy at all. And the warp is going to be the strands of yarn that go up and down. And then the weft are the decorative touches that you're going to do going horizontal. So that's the difference in the warp and the weft. And so you just, honestly, you just go down and you go up to the next one, hook it in there. Hook it around that little hook. And I'm just, nothing's fancy or special. You're just wrapping it around the little hook that's there. And then you just go up and then back down. And you want to do this all the way across. If you want to do the largest weaving possible, you could just do a little bit, or you could do the whole thing. You could just do like a 5-inch stripe down the middle if you wanted to do a narrow weaving, or you could load this whole thing and then you could do a weaving this size. You could make several different weavings and sew them together to make a large blanket or wall hanging if you wanted to use this type of a loom. So this is the store-bought one. And then I'm going to show you how to make these cardboard ones. So if you want to try weaving without putting out a lot of money or expense, then you can just go ahead and make one of these and still do some lovely weavings on these. And then if you really like it, then you can invest in the other loom. So let's go ahead and switch to the view of my hands. Okay. I had everything laid out and I knocked it on the floor. So let's see what we got. Okay, any questions so far about anything that I've covered? I haven't covered that much yet, but any questions at all about how to warp the store-bought loom?
Instead of a store-bought loom, could you use like an empty wooden or metal picture frame?
Absolutely. You can use anything. What you need is something that will support the warp for you, so that you can just get a nice picture frame or something and just wrap it around and maybe space the warp out evenly and then tape them in place with some masking tape so they don't shift around as you're weaving. But anything like that will work. For this homemade one, you cut the cardboard. You can use cardboard. You cut the cardboard to whatever shape you like. And you can see that the corrugated center is going up and down vertical. And then just use wood glue or Elmer's glue or some kind of craft glue. Cover this whole piece with glue. Get a paintbrush and paint it on really nice. And then put another piece of cardboard the same size. And you can see the corrugated center is going horizontal. So you want them to go in opposite directions because that'll help to add a little bit of strength to it. I mean, it's only cardboard, but you want it to be as strong as possible. And then cover this, paint this with a nice thick coat of glue, Elmer's glue, wood glue, and then put another piece, same size, on top. This is my battery on my computer. Okay, I think it's good. Okay, you put another piece on top, and this time you want them running vertical. So that way it'll give you maximum strength. And then you don't put glue on this one. This is going to be kind of the face of your loom. And then you want to get cut 3, really 6, cut 6 little stripes of cardboard that are about 2 inches wide, but you want them the same width as your loom. And then you're going to glue that down. You're going to glue this one on top of it and then glue this one. And then you're going to do the same thing at the bottom. You're just going to glue them in place. And then the last one, you're going to reveal this corrugated center. So what you're going to do is kind of peel it apart. And you can use a tapestry needle if you need it to kind of help you get it going. If you need help getting that going. And then what that's going to do is these are going to end up being the dents for your loom. And that's the yarn or the string is going to rest in these grooves. And that will help keep your warp being spaced out nicely, and it won't like shift and move around as much, which can make it hard to weave. And then you're going to glue these on the top. And then, so you want to do this the day before you want to learn to weave, or you want to weave. I put a couple pieces of cardboard in the center and then put a couple of books on top of it, something heavy, and let it sit overnight to dry. But you do want to put something heavy on it, like maybe put a cutting board on it and then stack some heavy books, something, because you want to push it down really tight, let it dry overnight, maybe 2 days, check it and see. But then once it's 100% dry, then you're ready to start. And then you'll end up with something like this. So you can see here, I have my yarn. It's lining up in those corrugated ridges, and it keeps it from moving and shifting around. So this actually works out to be quite a nice little loom. The reason I glue these on the edge to raise it up a little bit is it does make it easier to work if the strings aren't pressed clear down. So you can see they're raised up a little bit, and it makes it easier to work. Okay, can you guys see how to do that? Do you have any questions about how to make this cardboard loom? Pretty straightforward.
We did have someone give a tip for how to get that peel the layers apart. She says if you spritz it with water, then that paper covering will come off pretty easily as well if you let it dry just a little bit.
Yeah, that's a good idea. So, and I certainly didn't make up how to make these cardboard looms. So if you go on YouTube, you can find tutorial videos that go in more depth, but it's really not complicated. And then to warp this one, you're going to wrap the yarn all the way around. So you do use quite a bit more yarn. Just kind of tie it off, make a nice secure knot, nothing fancy, just like a square knot or whatever. And then you're just going to wrap it, and you're going to line it up in each one of these grooves. take it around and bring it back up. And then when you get to the other end, you're just going to tie a nice tight knot to tie it off on the other end. And then you have your warp set up. Now, when you want to pull these so that they're nice and snug, you don't want a lot of slack in them, but you can see as I'm touching them, they're not super tight either. They're not like, you know, guitar strings or anything super tight. There is a little bit of play in them. If you make them too tight, then when you cut it to release it, if you kind of stretch them, make them too tight, it'll kind of spring back a little bit into shape and cause your weaving to wrinkle. And that's kind of how they make seersucker, that seersucker fabric for the summertime, how it's kind of pre-wrinkled. They make it really tight and then they let that, it's kind of the theory that works on. So if that's the kind of look you're going for, you know, go ahead and do it. But just know that usually you don't want this to be super tight. And if you just kind of stroke it like this a couple of times, it helps to even the tension out a little bit. And if you happen to feel one that's super loose, you can, you know, because they're all connected, you can kind of like sort that out and shift that tension around a little bit to make the loose ones a little tighter and to kind of spread that tension out. Okay. Any questions about how to set this up, how to warp it or make it, or how to get your warp the right tension?
Can we see the back of the loom? Does the yarn go all the way around that?
Yeah, the back looks just like the front. You could actually do a second weaving on the back if you wanted to, but I guess you could go ahead and, you know, build the dents up on this side too, and then you could, you know, weave on both sides of it. That's actually a good idea. I never thought of that before. But yeah, so the back, you just want to wrap it all the way around because there's nothing that you can't, like, there's no hooks here. You know, if you wanted to sort out a way to attach a hook to each one of these, but, you know, the cardboard's not going to last forever, and I think it would probably rip. So this is just kind of the best way for practicing. And then if you really get into it, you can buy a proper loom. You can buy like a nice big wooden loom or something. Any other questions?
Nope, we're good to go.
So I've got another one set up. So I do want to talk a little bit. This one is warped with red. The other one I warped with black. But if you don't want the warp to show at all, if you want the warp to be invisible, then what you want to do is use a nice thin cotton, something that's going to be kind of thin, that's not going to take up a lot of space, so that the yarn that you're using to make your weft will be able to kind of fluff up and take charge, and that's what you're going to see. Excuse me. If you do use a bright color like this and a nice thick yarn, you're going to end up seeing the warp. And that's called a warp facing weaving, so that you're going to see the warp and the weft, and that's going to add to your design. So you can decide, you know, do I want the warp to show, or do I want the warp to be more invisible? And so for something like this, how this is a thin white cotton, you can make the warp very invisible. So there's two different ways you can decide how to do it. I want to talk a little bit about setting up your loom and why I have it set up the way that I do. So these two pieces of cardboard that I have on the bottom are called spacers. So they're just going to space out. They're going to help space out and add some tension to your warp. Sorry, what's wrong? I have a little cough. So they're going to add tension to your warp. They're going to even out, and they're going to also add to the distance and help keep them set up nicely. And I like to use two of them. Sometimes you can just use one, but I think if you add two of them, and you're just going to weave them the traditional weave, which is called a tabby weave, which you just go under, over, under, over, under, over. So this is a traditional weave or a tabby weave. and you just weave your, excuse me, you weave your cardboard through that way. And then the next one, you do the opposite. And that's what's going to add to your tension. So any questions on how to insert those? But you wouldn't add them here. You would only add them at the bottom. And then this is going to help for finishing later. I'm going to show you how to do this. This is called twining, like twine, and it adds a lot of strength and structure to your work. And then you want to do an inch or two of the basic tabby weave. And I like to do another row of the twining, and it gives it a very, very secure edge. So if you're going to use this weaving as a blanket, or you're going to sew it into a pillow, or you're going to use it for something that's maybe a rug, something that's actually going to get a lot of wear, this kind of setup will make it very, very strong. And then what you can do is you can fold this under like a salvage edge and sew it down, and it's going to help make your edge much stronger. Excuse me. Any questions about, I'm going to show you how to do these stitches, but other than how to do them, any question about setting it up or why you set it up this way? No? Okay, I would also then add 2 spacers to the top. You wouldn't have to make them quite this wide. I just put one on the top because it was taking up a lot of my space for weaving. So you can use 1 or you can use 2. It's probably better to use 2 thin ones instead of 1 thick one, but this is just how I have it set up for now, for demonstrating. Okay. Any questions at all before we move forward?
No questions so far. I will give everyone a little activity to do after class, though. I think that today's Google Doodle is about a traditional Native American weaver, and there's a really cool interactive game you can play. So go do that after class.
Okay. So, I wanted to show you one other super quick loom that I have put together. If you just want to get started, you don't want to fuss, all this is just a piece of cardboard. I just cut some grooves, so just like measure off every like 1/4 inch or every 1/2 inch, and then cut grooves into your cardboard on the top and the bottom, and then just wrap it. And mine was, my tension got a little loose, so I just kind of tightened it up with some strings on the back to kind of tighten it. And you can go ahead and start weaving on something like this without any fuss, make it super easy. If you want to just start right now, you can get a bigger piece of cardboard to do it. You can see here, I've got my weaving started. It would actually be very nice. You could make coasters. You could make a whole bunch of little squares and sew them together to make a table runner or a blanket. So you don't need anything fancy or expensive, and you don't need to put in a lot of work for a loom. If you do get a fancy one, then it's a lot nicer and easier to work with sometimes, but these will serve and work very well. Okay, so once you get your spacers in, and once you establish, if you're just going to make a wall hanging or something that's not going to be used very much, you don't need quite such a secure edge. So now you're actually ready to start weaving, to start working on your project. And so a couple of tools that you're going to need to get started. You're going to need, it's called a comb. This is a weaver's comb. And you use this to kind of beat down your work, to kind of make it so that everything is kind of lining up nicely. If you don't have one of those, you can use a fork. So I've got this fork. This is a serving fork. You could, with big warp like this, you could use a serving fork. Works just as well. A regular dinner fork works just as well. Or you can use a proper hair comb. Say I have this big one, that works fine, or just like a normal one of those little plastic basic combs. Anything will work. They all work very nicely. You're also going to want some tapestry needles. And you want needles that have an eye that's big enough to put your yarn through, but you don't necessarily want them super sharp. You're not piercing the strands, you're lifting them up with it. So you're going up and down. So you don't need it to be sharp. Another thing you can use, which makes it nice, you can get these doll making needles. And because they're longer, sometimes they're easier to work with going through. And I also have, this is an upholstery needle. This is used in upholstery. You push this clear through the pillow and then you can tie it off on one end, pull it really tight and kind of make tufts in upholstered furniture. So that's what this is for. But you can also use it, you can take this all the way across. So you can kind of see how it makes it a little easier. You can order these online. It's just an upholstery needle or a doll making, or I'm sorry, or mattress needle. Sometimes it's called a mattress needle. And so it kind of makes it nice. You can kind of go through all in one and then pull it through. So that's pretty much all you need to start. Some things that, and I'll show you how to use these. This is called a pickup stick. These are pickup sticks, and I'll show you what they're for. And you might want a shuttle. You can load a lot of yarn on this shuttle and then pass that through kind of the way. And then you have a lot of yarn. You can have several yards on there that you're passing through. So you don't have to try to work with a ball of yarn or something like that. Okay, so let's get started with basic weaving. So I'm going to use this yarn. This one is, it is Hometown Bonus Bundle in a Dallas Gray, which is available on lionbrand.com or on michaels.com. And for the basic tabby weave, which is the easiest weave, and it's probably the one you're most familiar with. And put your glasses on. So you're going to start on the edge, and you're going to go, you're just going to pick one. You're going to go under, over, under, over. So you're just going all the way across. We don't have to go all the way across, but you're just doing the whole area that you want to work. You're just going under, over, under, over. And then you want to pull that through. And then you can use your fork or your comb and you just push it down. Push it down nicely, okay? I'm going to pull some more yarn through. I'm going to cut this and just work with some short pieces. And then you want to leave a tail to, you can weave those in later, or you can kind of weave them in now so that you don't have so much work to do later. You do it as you go, don't you, Claire?
As long as I remember to, yes.
Yeah. I never do. I never remember. But and then on the way back, you want to do the opposite of what you did. So I went under this one, so I'm going to go over, under, over, under, and you're going to do the opposite of what you did. And that's what kind of locks everything in place and creates the fabric. That's what changes it into just like loose strands of yarn, and it turns it into fabric. So here I've got it, I think I'm off a bit, but I'm just going to leave it for now. That's what just, you have to pay very close attention, and I'm not paying quite so close attention. Oh no, that's where I wove my tail in, so that's why. That's why I don't do it as I'm going, because then it throws me off. I was looking at the placement of my tail instead of my actual weft. Sorry, I have a cough. actually went and had a COVID test on Saturday because I've got this cold and it did come back negative, but I've been home alone all day and I haven't been talking. So as soon as I start talking, apparently I'm going to start coughing. So, and when you go back, again, you want to do the opposite of what you did in the previous row. So over, under, over, under. So I want to talk about a few things here that you need to watch out for. Okay, when you bring your weft across, you don't want to pull it tight, because if you pull it tight, then you can see it will pull your warp in, and it'll kind of be bowed like an hourglass. And that's not, I mean, that's probably not what you want. It's nice if it has a nice square edge, a straight edge. So when you're pulling it through, sometimes I'll actually kind of pull it out, so that way I'm not allowing it to be pulled in. And so you think this is just going straight across, so you should just be able to take it straight across, but it's actually not going straight across. It's going up and down, up and down, up and down. So going straight across is different than going weaving in and out. So it actually takes a little bit more yarn than what you're realizing. So when you take it straight across, you do want to kind of take it on a diagonal like this. I've seen other weavers do kind of like zigzags, kind of like that. But you know, the quickest way between 2 points is a straight line. So you want to give yourself a little extra slack. So if you don't do a straight line, then you're going to have extra slack. And then when you pound that down, it allows it to have enough slack to go up and down, up and down. And then give that a little tug right here just to make sure it's not pulling. And that way you'll probably have some of them that pull in, because that's usually what happens when you're learning. Still happens to me sometimes. I have to be really careful. But that's kind of two ways. If you pull it like this, and if you leave it on a diagonal, or if you do like a curvy line, that will give you enough slack so that you have enough length of yarn to go up and down in your weave. Is that any other ways, Claire, to do that? What do you think?
I usually do the first one. I just sort of lay it at a 45-degree angle across the other warp threads.
Yeah, that's usually what I do. I usually just, and again, over here, you don't want to, see if you pull it tight, now you're going to run into problems. So if you pull it tight by mistake and you're not realizing, you know, just go ahead and let it out, but you don't want to now pull the row below it. So just every now and then give it a little snug. Pull it like that. Like, that's probably good. You could, whatever. And then pound it down. You might not want that. You can go ahead and pull a little of the slack out of it if you see there's way too much. You don't want too much slack. So you can you'll kind of get a feel for it as you're going. So that way it's not, I'm really fussing over it, and you won't fuss over it this much as you practice. You'll get the feel for it pretty quick. So any questions about this basic weave, which is called, is it called just, I know it's called basic or just a tabby weave. Is it called anything else? A plain weave, Claire? What is it called? Anything else?
Yeah, plain weave is another term you hear used for this structure.
Little snug. And so you don't have to work the colors the whole length of your loom. So I'm only taking this gray part of the way across. I'm not going all the way across because I didn't want to. So it's your design, it's your weaving. You can do as you want. So then I'm going to tuck that in the back, and I'll deal with those another day. We'll think about those tomorrow. Give it a little snug to make sure we're not. Okay. Any questions? Any questions on that? All right, so I wanted to show you a little bit about this stick. It's called a pickup stick. Well, I'm getting ahead of myself. So this stick here can be used, instead of the spacer, which I was using it as a spacer, you can actually use this one to create a shed. So you weave this one through, just a basic tabby weave. And then when you stand it up on its end, you can kind of see it lifts the yarn. So if I wanted to just go ahead and take this through, you see how much easier that is than weaving it through up and down, up and down. I can just go straight through. You still want to give it that diagonal and pound it down into place. And then on the way back, however, you will have to go up and down. You can't put that in the other way. You just have to do it like this. Take it across. Go ahead and pound it down. Make sure you're not pulling it tight. And now I can open up my shed and very easily then just pass that right through. And that makes at least one pass of your weft will be very easy. And then you can actually use this to go ahead and pound it down with this. And if you pound it down really tight, you can see I'm not having any red showing. I'm not having a warp facing. But if you don't pound it down as tight, you can still have some of the red show. So you can decide, you know, in some parts of your weaving, you might have the warp showing, and in some parts you might not have it showing. That's the design that you can make a decision about on how you want it to look. And if I was using really thin yarn, then it would show up a lot more than with this thicker yarn, because this yarn is the same thickness as the yarn I'm using. So any questions about inserting this for the shed, this pickup stick to create the shed, and how to do that? And you can buy wooden ones. No questions? I just made these up.
No questions on the shed. We did have a question on, so if you're only going like halfway or partway across the warp there, how would you start from the other side?
Let me show you that. All right, I'm just gonna cut this off and tuck it under. And let's get a different color. And this is Woolies Thick and Quick that I'm using now, this green. It's in grass green. And it's nice to use different colors, different textures. You can use different thicknesses of yarn. I'm using pretty thick yarn because it's usually easier to see on camera, but you could use different thicknesses of yarn as well. So let's pass this through. Let's do a little section here of green. And I'm going to leave that tail for finishing later. And I can't really beat it down with my pedal, but I can use, that's when you want to use your comb. Now there are two ways you can do this. First of all, you kind of want to get that tail out of the way. Sometimes you will, so this, if you look down here at this gray section, so this here is on this little part down here. This is the last warp yarn that was part of that gray section. And sometimes you will go here and it will actually create a little hole. And then you go back across and you'll have a little space there. You won't have, it won't be quite so solid. Or you can go around that same warp that the gray one is around and go back. And that way you will have no hole there. Does that make sense? Are you able to see what I'm doing? And then pound it down. See, I'm not pushing it down so hard, and I'm allowing some of that red to show, and it can actually be quite decorative. And again, like, it doesn't have to show in all areas. So lift up. I forget to lift up my shed half the time, and I just do it usually by hand. I find it very soothing. I kind of enjoy it. But again, you don't want to pull it tight, so make sure you're not pulling it tight. Close your shed. Don't pound it down too tight, or else you'll lose your warp facing. And then
General weaving question, Darren. Do you always work from the bottom up?
you know, I think most weavers do traditionally work from the bottom up, but you certainly wouldn't have to. So you want to go around that same warp that the last gray one is around, or you don't have to, and you can allow that hole to be created, and then just go back across. And that's how you would do sections. And you wouldn't have to do, maybe when you're practicing at first, just do like rectangles and squares, but you can do circles, you can do triangles, you can do like odd shapes, like they don't even have to, like you could just do swirls or vines, or, you know, it could create any image that you want. But sometimes for practicing, it's nice to keep things simple. And so there you can see how that is allowing the warp to show, and it's kind of like a little checkerboard, so it's kind of nice. And here the warp doesn't show, and it's a solid, and that's kind of nice. So, you know, you can decide what, you know, how you want yours to look, and, you know, act accordingly. Any questions about tabby weave? And then just tuck that end out of the way so that it's not going to bother you. Stuff like that bothers me, gets in my way. And then just continue on weaving as you choose. Questions?
If you did want to weave like a picture or a design, what's the best way to follow that? Someone asked if they should use chalk lines to gauge shapes on the warp.
You could, the best, I've seen people just take a picture and put it under their warp. And then you can just follow the outline of that picture. Like if, you know, maybe start simple with like a cartoon character or something like from a coloring book, but you can follow that guide. You could certainly mark your warp then, like you could, if you use chalk, I think it'll probably, you know, wipe off, but you could use like a permanent marker if you wanted to mark and make notes like on your, to kind of help direct you. But then, you know, you want to make sure that that's not going to be seen later. You want to make sure that it's, maybe it's not warp facing. How would you do it, Claire? Have you done that much?
I did a while ago, and I did what you said first, just use like sort of a picture. I was doing this on a big floor loom, so I sort of pinned it to the warp threads because there wasn't a piece of cardboard to hold it up. But then you basically just like trace over the picture with your various yarn colors.
Yeah, that's the best way. But I mean, if you did want to make some, you know, notes, like if you couldn't quite see through it or something, you could, you know, make a, I say notes, but I mean, you know, just like marks on your warp to kind of help guide you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this off. Any questions before we move on?
Nope, we're ready to go.
All right, so you could certainly just do this. You can see by doing the warp facing and the non-warp facing and switching colors, you could make a very, very nice wall hanging or placemat or whatever you want to make just by using this tabby weave, which is very lovely. But if you want to make and have something that is a little bit more textural, oh, one thing before we move on, we're not going to do it today, but I want you to know a little bit about this shed. So I said you can only have one, because if you feel like you should be able to go ahead and move another one, so that way you can just use your shed for both, and you don't ever have to like weave it through by hand. But what happens is, so now I've opened my shed, close it, and then you can't open it because this one's in the way. So you're not going to be able to You know, it feels like you should, and go ahead and try it. But there's something called a soft shed where you can do this one, and then all of the strings that are not involved, you can tie a loop of yarn. It's very tedious. You can tie a loop of yarn around the other ones, and then put that loop of yarn on a stick, like a knitting needle or something, and then you pull it up, and you can research how to do that. I just want you to know that that is an actual thing, but we're not going to get into it today. So there are options for using, and then the floor loom, like Claire was working on, it's very complicated. There's all kinds of things that lift and lower, and that's a whole other life. That's not, so just lots and lots of options. So one stitch that is really fun, I'm going to show you a couple different textures you can do. This one is called sumac. And I'm gonna do it up here so you can kind of see what, hopefully you can, if you can't see what I'm doing, let me know. So you just go ahead and kind of, you can tie it in a knot, but I usually just kind of loop it around to just kind of attach it to your, and this
Could you use it, Darren? Could you do it with a different yarn color so we can see the difference between the row below? Thank you.
Sorry. And this one, we're going to be wrapping each one of the warps separately. So I'm going to be moving in this direction. I'm going to be moving from the right to the left, but you can certainly go from the left to the right. You can go back and forth, whatever you want with this. So I'm moving that direction. So I want to wrap my warp yarn kind of going backwards. So I'm going to move ahead, and then I'm going to wrap my yarn around my warp and kind of move back. So it's like one step forward, one step back almost. And now I'm going to move to the next one. And I'm moving in this direction. So I'm wrapping in the opposite. So it's almost like I'm not sure I want to go forward. So I'm going to look back. And I don't usually pull these real tight because it's nice to see. It gives you this kind of raised texture. So I kind of let it be, I don't know, can you see what I'm doing clearly? So I'm going to wrap this one. So I'm just going to take it under. I'm going to go over the warp, and then I'm going to wrap it by going under it. Pull my yarn through. Kind of set the tension to how I want it. Move to the next one. You can lift up that warp, go over it, and then wrap under it, coming back. And then kind of sort out your tension. You can do that each time. And once you get the hang of it, it actually goes really fast. And one thing I find that this can do for you is if you do get off track, like you think it's super easy to weave the tabby weave and go over and under and over and under, but you know, sometimes you do get off track. And if you get off track and your work still looks okay, but you don't want to, you want to kind of get sorted back out. If you're just making a decorative piece, you can then go back over it with a row of sumac, and it kind of reestablishes everything nice and even. And then you could pick up your tabby weave from there. So it gives you a great texture, and it gives some structure to your weaving. And it's very, very nice. So you don't always have to use yarn. And I'm going to do some of the sumac with this big piece of roving. And usually I see the sumac done with this roving because it gives it such a nice, nice look. So we're going to do it the same. Oops. Sorry, this roving's kind of hard to work with. Once you get going, though, it's not. And I want to show you what can happen. So when I was using the yarn, I did every string, but because this roving is so big, if I do every string, if I do every warp, you can see how it takes up too much space and it's going to crowd the warp strings and it's going to force it out. So it's going to end up, it's not going to have a nice straight edge. It's going to actually go out, and it can go out quite a bit if you do several rows of this. So what you do instead, you don't have to use every warp. Oops, sorry. You can just kind of gauge it and see, like, if you want to have like nice big billowy decoration, you know, you might want to space it out every third one, every fourth one. See how it's laying and then decide, you know, what's going to be best for your weaving and for whatever, how the thickness, depends on the thickness of your warp, and it depends on the thickness of your, of the weft, which will decide how many you should skip. But you can see how pretty that is. It gives you such a nice look. Lots of, I certainly wouldn't do this on a rug or a blanket that's going to get a lot of wear because it gets very, very fuzzy. This is more suited for something like just a decorative, like a wall hanging. And then if you go back, it kind of makes a braid. It looks like a braid. It's not really a braid. You can see how pretty that could be. You could go clear across. You could do like 5 or 6 rows of it. And that's called sumac. So and one thing, like if you use this big fluffy, like roving type, you can see it really takes over and hides. So like you can't even see this white sumac that I did because it hides it. So like maybe don't like do some really clever stitch or like your favorite yarn, or if you're really trying to bring out a certain color, and then put this above it because now your work's hidden and it doesn't make any difference. So if you know you're going to do something like this, do it where do a couple of rows of plain tabby where it's very plain, and then do this and you won't be like hiding any of your hard work. Okay, any questions? You want to see sumac again, or do you want to see something else?
Well, we've got just about 10 minutes left in class.
Oh my goodness, I didn't realize we were going. Okay, let's move forward then. Moving forward. Okay, so the last class, we just did these stitches and then we talked a little bit about finishing. So for this stitch right here, which is called twining, like the word twine with the string, I like to start out, if you're using 2 different colors, I tie them in a knot like this. But if you're using 1 color, then you could just loop it around. But this is how I like to start it. And I put 1 color on the bottom. I'm going to move up here a little bit and do it. So you've got straddled kind of your warp. And then you take 1 color and you go under it, under the next warp. And then you skip that one and you take the next color and you go under the next warp. And you want to take the next color. You can see how I'm going over and under the next. So what happens is each one of those warp threads gets kind of wrapped in yarn. And this is a very strong, a very secure stitch. And if you do 1 color, it's not as showy, but if you do 2 colors, then it gives you this wonderful, it's kind of like a barber pole look. So are you able to see what I'm doing? Do you want me to? So pick up the next warp. This white is going to go over the blue and then under the warp. Okay. And then we're going to move to the next one. Go ahead and pick it up with your finger. And the blue then is going to go up over the white and under the next warp. And so you can see what, and basically it's just going to twist again. So this warp is going to be wrapped in like kind of twisted all around the yarn. And once you get going, you can actually move pretty fast with this. And this, you can do straight lines. This is 2 rows together. So this is, I did 2 rows. I went across and came back. If you do just 1 row, it looks kind of like a barber's pole. But if you want to make a circle or like a triangle or something, you can do this and you can, let's see, we're going to do a, you can see how it's easy to kind of manipulate. And now I'm going to, you can leave this empty, and then you could do another twining up and down. And then you go back later and fill each one of these triangular areas in. And it's kind of how I did this. I did twining, but I just did the same color as the triangle. And then I went back later and filled them in. And here's one where where you have the hole. I wanted to have that as a demonstration. And here on this one, where I joined my colors, where the gray and the blue share the same warp, they're both wrapped around the same, you get a nice solid. So that's kind of how it looks. I prefer this way, but that's also a valid way. Questions about the twining? Okay. All right, so with these stitches, you can do a lot and make some really great designs. And in the handout, there are several other stitches that you can review and practice. But we only have an hour, so we don't have time to cover everything. So once you're finished, once you're 100% finished, you take these out. And the nice thing about those is they save a lot of room down here for finishing. And I'm going to go ahead. Well, I'm not going to cut it yet. I'm going to show you. If you set your weaving up like this, where you have all of this structure, you don't have to do the hem stitch. But if you just start off with tabby weave, then it's nice to do a hem stitch to secure it. And so for the hem stitch, you can do 3, you can do 4. If you have a big weft like this, you should probably do 2. So you want to go under 2, and you're going to go, then you're going to go up into your weft, go about 2 or 3 rows in. You're going to go back under. And it's kind of like blanket stitch. If you know blanket stitch, then you're going to kind of pull it through there, and it kind of makes a little knot. And you can go ahead and pull that tight. We're going to go under 2. I'm going to do 2. You can do whatever you want. So you can go under 2. And then you always want to go into the body of your weaving the same distance. Okay. And now I'm going to go back under those same 2. And I'm going to bring it through this loop of yarn that I've created. So it's kind of, again, it's kind of like blanket stitch. Under 2, come up through your weaving, back under the same 2, are you able to see? No, sometimes it's hard in a video to see. So under 2, and you're going to come up into the body of your weaving. Kind of pull it snug. Under the same 2, and then you're going to pull it through the loop. So it's like you're tying a knot, which basically you're tying a knot. And I'm not going to go clear across. You would want to go clear across. but we don't have enough time. So, and then you'd weave these ends in, or you can actually save some of your tabby weave, a really long piece, and then you'd have one less end to weave in. And then for finishing, you're going to cut it loose. Cut it all the way across. You also want to finish the top the same way you finish the bottom. So once you do your weaving, you want to make sure you're doing a nice secure top edge, because you don't want the top to fall apart either. And then if you did the hem stitch, then you get these little groupings, which are really cute. And then I like to, sorry, you get to about 2 here and 2 here. I take one out of each grouping and tie it to the one next to it, kind of snug. You don't want to distort your fabric. You don't want to pull it too tight. And then you can do that. So one out of this one out of the next one, and then tie it tight and nice and snug and secure. You just do a square knot. Just make it nice. And you would do that all the way across. And then you could have a decorative fringe. So you could leave this fringe. You could actually go back in with a needle and add more yarn to make a more decorative fringe. You could unravel these and make a nice fluffy fringe. You could turn it over, and then to weave your ends in, you could weave all of these in, and this is basically the same way you'd weave in the ends on the sides as well. And the way I like to do this is, you know, because the weaving is, it's basically a 3-dimensional piece of fabric, because the warps are running in there. So I like to kind of weave it vertical and kind of tuck this in with the warp. So feed your needle through and then check the other side and make sure you're not seeing the needle, because if you see the needle on this side, when you pull the yarn through, it's going to show. So you just want to pull that through. And then I would probably go ahead and just snip that off. And that's how you weave your ends in. I like to tuck them. Claire, you do it horizontal, don't you? I like to tuck mine in vertical. So you can just kind of tuck them in, kind of follow the path of the warp that's in there, and then pull it through. And that's how you would weave in all of your ends, or you could leave a decorative fringe. Now, if this weaving were all like finished, if there's a whole weaving here, and you wanted to use this for a rug to give yourself a nice secure bottom edge, you could fold this under. So all of this is just waste. This is all just salvage, even though it's pretty, but you fold it under like this, and then you've got this nice edge on the bottom. And it's nice if the back of your work looks pretty too, right? So if you had this on the bottom of a rug, it would be, you know, a nice little surprise when you were washing your rugs. And then you just whip stitch it down in place. And then that's going to give you a nice secure edge. So if you're stepping on it or kicking it, or, you know, if it gets scuffed up, you're going to have a nice thick edge there to kind of help keep it nice. You could also do this for a blanket or a wall hanging. If you did it wall hanging, you could do that, make a channel, and then put a curtain rod through there. So you could actually make a channel like this, put a curtain rod through, and then that would be really pretty on the back. It's nice if the back's pretty too. Any questions? I know we kind of covered that finishing really fast, but you can see how strong this is. This with the twining and the tabby and then the twining, it's not, you know, it's without any finishing at all, it's not going to come loose. It really helps to make it very secure. You could make a belt. It might be a pretty belt or a nice bracelet. You could do a headband. You could make little projects like that. Any questions? We're right at 5, but we can take a few questions if we have any.
I'm going to go ahead and put the links to both handouts in the chat again, in case anybody needs those. And we'll do a reminder to everybody that this class was being recorded. So if you need to watch it back, you can do that. It should be up in about 24 hours on the Michaels YouTube channel, and then about 24 hours after that on the michaels.com/classes page.
Wouldn't this be a great, if you crocheted or knitted a purse, this would be a great way to add a nice strong handle, like a purse strap, and you can make it out of the same yarn so it would match. I think that'd be cute. So, all right, if you do have any questions, if you're weaving and having a good time and then you run into questions, feel free to contact me. You can contact me on my social media. On Facebook, it's just my name, just Darren Morris, spelled out like normal. Send me a direct message. On Instagram, it's Mr. Woolly Bear, M-I-S-T-E-R spelled out, and then Woolly Bear. Maybe Claire will put that in the chat. Just send me a direct message. If you make something, I'd love it if you tag me in it. I'd love to see the things that you've made. But if you do run into questions or have any problems, just send me a direct message. I don't get very many, but I can usually try to respond to them pretty quick. So, you know, I'd hate to leave you in a lurch because I feel like we kind of plowed through a lot of information, but I wanted to cover as much as possible. So you can always, you know, contact me that way. All right. Thanks for coming to class. It takes a lot of practice, but you know, it's a lot of fun. All right.